Hey traders, welcome to the Thursday equity update. Starting with the S&P, as you can see, we've gone into a little bit of a corrective structure here, and I imagine we're going to be here for a little while. As you can see, quite a nice strong rally if we're going into the lower time frames, so we should be here until kind of next week. The question is whether we're going to see the same zigzag type corrective structure that we saw earlier on, or are we going to see this just chop all the way back up to the highs before giving us a C wave to complete the flat pattern. That's the most likely outcome in my view, given the bullishness of the market at the moment, but it's very early days, so we'll just have to wait and see how things play out. Nothing really tradable at the moment in my view. We're just waiting patiently to see what comes and look for those long entries once again. Going on to SPX, as you can see, same scenario. Just looks like a little bit of a corrective structure in this region, following a nice strong rally. So pretty much the same. And QQQ, I still think we're looking at a complex flat pattern, and we might find that this is going to turn into a bit of a triangle B wave and then get another chop higher from there, because we're seeing a lot of very straight up and down price action. There's not much complexity in any of this price action. So for now, very early days. As you can see, we've got a long way to go until this fully plays out, but time will tell what the structure is, and we'll get a trade probably later on in the year. Like I said, tech really overdone at the moment, so just staying out of that for a while until something clears up. The DJI still doing really well, should go into correction pretty soon as well. As you can see, pretty much a straight line up. And the big gap that's probably going to be closed at some point, so expect this gap to close before we see more upside. And the Russell, same thing, really just a straight line up. So you can expect this to become a decent corrective structure before we see more upside. So very much along the lines of very quiet markets, I imagine, for the rest of the week and early next week, and probably see a continuation of upside later in the week next week. Facebook, as you can see, pretty much following our corrective structure that we were looking at. Didn't quite get all the way to the highs, which I thought it would, and it looks like it's pulled back quite strongly from there. So we probably have begun the C wave of the corrective structure. My only concern with that is all of this is happening rather quickly in terms of the length of the correction in relation to the preceding impulse. So I wouldn't be surprised if we actually turn around and still go see the highs and then still take a slow chop back down later on. So just keep an eye out for that. Apple, nice corrective structure so far, and pretty much following our roadmap. Again, we need this to play out much longer than it has, so expect this to be here for a long time if we are going to see a decent corrective structure. Amazon, same story. Microsoft, same story. All the tech's really in the same place. Nothing really you want to be trading at the moment. Netflix, still waiting for the turn and corrective structure before trading that to the upside. Fairly short-term trade to come though. And Google, same story. There's nothing really tradable. Alexion running nicely. We've gone to touch the new highs, and we should see a little bit more of a continuation to the upside, although we're very close to our minimum target levels. As you can see, we're already touching the minimum, so upside is capped. So basically, if you're in the trade, you're holding on. If you're not in the trade, you're really being very patient before looking for a long entry, because you'd really require a decent corrective structure before getting long at this point. Advanced micro devices, in really choppy market, really messy. Again, I think this is going to be kind of in line with Facebook, where we've seen a nice push higher and a big pullback, but I still think we are going to push higher from here and go see those highs once again. It's very similar chart to Apple in a sense. Lots of impulses surrounding a fairly simple B wave. So let's see how it plays out. Again, really nothing much in terms of a trade available there. Boeing looks like it's kind of following our roadmap as well. Seeing a little bit of a bearish candle in yesterday's session means we might see this pullback now all the way back down towards 100, kind of 80 to 100, maybe 90 is your target for this move. So if you start to see some downside, you could really start to get a pretty nice trade on the short side if it starts to play out. It really does look like it wants to in terms of the corrective structure, but it hasn't been ideally very clean. So be patient with it. What's nice is you have a little gap here supporting the move to the downside. And like I said, nice strong bullish close. But again, just be patient with it and wait for those those short entries on the lower time frames before engaging with this because of the uncertainty. Alibaba looks like we're starting to see a nice little pullback here. Starting to get some legs to the downside, decent gap in the market. So if you are in the trade, you can expect this to start to get some legs, and downside target is around about the 210 region. So a nice little short trade available to you as well. Beyond, big gap to the downside. So that's kind of, like I said, there was a good potential that this was going to turn into an expanding because of the little confusion here that's occurred and this line. So we have now seen this turn into an expanding flat pattern. We're now looking for that turn to the upside. And the same nature of Boeing, you now have a little gap here that's supportive of the long trade as well. But again, just be patient with it, wait for the right entry. Seeing a little bit of a flag here on the lower time frames. We just really need to be patient with it. Obviously, there's quite a lot of momentum to the downside, and markets are quite slow at the moment and expected to be slow. So just be careful we don't see a little bit more downside and a close of this gap here, which we were talking about in previous analysis before we see that upside. So just be wary of getting in too soon because you could still see a little bit more downside before the turn occurs. Delta popped higher, which means we're probably going to have to start looking at this as potential expanding triangle as well. You can see pre-market already a little bit down, so we should see this push down towards the 30-buck region before seeing another kick higher. That's kind of what the chart is showing. But again, I said airlines are really messy at the moment, really confusing price structures, not the cleanest price action on this one. So I would kind of wait for this to play out. Ideally, I'd wait for this to pull back and push up and then only wait for the short up here if that does occur, because there's nothing really in it for me at these levels. I'm kind of sitting on the sidelines of this one, waiting for better price action. I see better price action in BA and American Airlines, which we'll get to later. So this is something we're just sitting on our hands, waiting for something to develop that looks more tradable. DuPont's still within this rising wedge. I still think this is going to break to the upside. And I still remain really bullish on this. The potential for this just to pull back to this region is obviously still available to us because this could become a kind of regular running flat moving forward. So you just need to be patient with this as well. But like we said, this is more investment, so this is just accumulation rather than trading. Walt Disney popped really nicely out of our area, out of our buy zone, and it's kind of hovering around here. My only concern is a big gap sitting here, and we did go touch on the minimum, so it potentially has done enough to continue to the downside now, which is a bit of a worry. But given the wider structure, I still think we are going to head higher from here. So potentially what we'll see is a little trickle down, close this gap, and then push up from here. So if you are long, it's kind of a tricky situation because you've got such a great push off the lows and great returns, but now there's the potential where you're going to have to hold all the way down to close this gap and potentially downside given the current structure. So it's really tricky on how to manage that. I'm not going to give you an advice. That's up to you how you choose to do it. EA Another one, really nice big gap to the downside following our expanding triangle, but at the same time, a really big gap. There's a little bit of an island gap here. So I'll remain bearish EA, but there's a chance these gaps go close before we see any further downside. I still think we're going to go see sub 80 on EA. So it's a really nice trade. You just need to either hold through the higher moves or close out and look to enter in this area once you see a turn to the downside. Forward, still waiting for forward to turn. Got quite a nice bearish close after yesterday's session. And still expecting some downside momentum on this one. So we just keep dragging this up, turning into a nice running flat. Structure still looks really good. Still expecting a pullback, and that's a pullback that you really want to buy. You really want to jump into the buy in this kind of 6 to 650 region once things pull back. In terms of the short, it is a half decent short. It's worth looking at if you can get a good entry. So just need to be patient with it. At the moment, there's nothing there, nothing to say we aren't going to continue higher from here. So I'm waiting for something that looks a little bit cleaner in terms of an entry point for the short trade. GDX, same story, not going to get into it. GDXJ, same story, not going to get into it. Goldman Sachs continues to perform well for us. As you can see, really clean structure, really nice upward momentum. A little bit of a gap here, which is a concern. We might see this pull back a little bit with the rest of the market and then see continuation to the upside, which could be an opportunity to get long once again. JOC looks really nice, really clean structure. Upside target around about 260 to 280. So still some nice upside potential on that one. Halliburton, again, gaps all over the market, but upside potential still really good. Might just crawl back to close the gap, but still see lots of upside on this. Still see a kind of 20 to 24 price target on Halliburton. Definitely worth getting in if you're not already. IBM. Looks like we've seen a turn to the upside. This has played out really nicely for us. Expanding flat, nice lower down to momentum, went into our buy zone, sucked up any stop losses in this region, and looks like it wants to head higher now. Price targets 141 to kind of 150 region, with potential to just correct there and continue to the upside. Following that, given that we've seen a complete structure and we now should be pointing towards the upside. It's one of the techs that kind of got left behind. So you might see a little bit of a catch up now and some really good upside potential. This is a really good place to get in and just wait for things to play out. But I wouldn't be surprised if this goes all the way back up to kind of 215 over the next 6 months or so. In terms of entry structures, haven't really seen much, but this may be starting to give you something along the lines of an entry. So maybe one more dip down, close this small little gap, and then that upside from there. But either way, I wouldn't really want to miss out on this one. So you may want to put an entry order above the highs regardless of what happens. It's just a wider stop loss if you do get taken in. LMT, Lockheed Martin, a little bit of upside momentum as we suspected, but it's like really dragging its feet, really slow and painful. But as expected, we're seeing, we should see alternation from these waves. So just taking its time. The structure is not great, it's really messy, but I'm still looking at the structure as this. So for now, the picture remains the same. Nothing really tradable at the moment. I'd rather wait for this move back down into this region following a break of the highs. And that's the trade you're looking for, because that's the complete structure. And we can start to trade this impulse to the upside. Live Nation, as we said, it was suspecting what we were looking at was a contracting flat, and then we did see a nice big gap. So again, we should see this kind of pull back, maybe drag its feet all the way back down to 57 and then see continuation to the upside. Also a possibility that we've seen the max upside and we are already getting this wave to the downside, which is a little bit painful. I imagine we are going to get more upside though, given that this is a contracting flat. Contracting flats are high momentum structures. So you should go see a break of the high at 76, maybe get up towards that 90 section and then pull back down, which would be a great short. But again, nothing really tradable in my view. We're just waiting for those price zones to be hit to take action. MasterCard, really confusing price action. and difficult to judge exactly what we're looking at. I'm going to go ahead and say I think we're still going down from here. I still think we're going to go break these lows at 280 and go down towards the 220 full target. I just think the structure looks really good, and even though we had this big spike higher, I still think there's grounds to see continuation to the downside. But again, like I said, it is a bit of a high risk. It's not the cleanest chart ever, so you may want to just wait for cleaner price action. What's on your side though is several little gaps that can really support a short trade, at least back down to 280. So just keep an eye on that. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a little bit of choppy price action all the way down towards this area, nice slow chop down, and then another spike higher, and then a pullback down, and it just becomes a more complex C wave in alternation to the A wave. So again, just have to be patient with it. If you do see an entry or you do want to take a bit of a risk, I would just keep it a low risk position. The risk reward is really good, but it is quite a high risk position given the structure that's available to you. 3M, nice little push off those highs, big bearish candle. Still a little bit of upside momentum though. I still think this is the structure that we're playing at. We just need to be patient with it. I don't really see anything else that can play out unless this turns into a triangle, a really convoluted triangle, in which case you'll have to let it run without us, because to me, there's nothing tradable in that. I want to see this pull back down towards this 140 region before getting long. Moderna, lots of upside momentum. As we were saying, we're trying to look at this as a bit of a triangle, and it looks like it did play out as a triangle. As you can see, pre-market today is up, and we've broken out of this upper trend line of the triangle. The BD trend line, always an important trend line, and we are pushing higher. So you can expect us to continue higher from here, especially with all the vaccine talk that's going on at the moment. Morgan Stanley, some really strong upside momentum. We were looking for this to push higher out of this bigger structure. It's played out really nicely in terms of price action. Just a little bit of a pullback, which we weren't expecting, but otherwise really strong upside, and we should see this continue higher. Maybe a slow pullback down towards 52, and then another push higher up towards our full target at about 68. So still a bit of lemon, or a bit of juice left in this lemon, if you want to say it that way. Definitely worth looking for that entry to the upside. Starbucks, still patiently waiting, perhaps going to still get this pullback. See how things play out, potentially looking at that as your central structure. There's a B wave, it's just a long drawn out A wave, ABC, quick little C wave to the upside, and now you have your C wave of that C of B, and now you get your main C wave to the downside before getting long here. I still think that's going to happen. I'm still remaining kind of stubborn on this one. I'm just going to be patient and see how it plays out. And if we do see that 79 region, and especially a little close of this little tiny gap here, you definitely want to get long, because that's one of the best trades left in the year, in my point of view. Twitter, this is the kind of thing we were talking about. Twitter just took forever to pull back, and eventually it just did happen. I'd already given up on this, and then we saw the pullback, and now Twitter is one of those that's also looking like a really strong trade to the upside. My only worry is we might see a little bit more downside before that happens. So it's a little bit of a concern. There's a big gap at the top here. So the trading can be tricky, but the upside is really good. I think the best way to trade it is to get in, but put a nice wide stop on it, probably as low as 27, which is really wide. It kind of takes away your risk reward, but at the moment, there's nothing to say entry is to the upside right now, unless you get a nice clean corrective structure in here, and this develops into something really clean. It's a good sign that we are heading higher from here because of the strong impulse off the lows. So an entry order above these highs, and maybe just a nice tight stop on a lower risk position is much better, a much better way of playing it, because you get the risk reward out of it, but keep your risk capped. And you just have to be prepared to take a stop loss on that one if it does pull back a little bit more, and then look for a re-entry to regain what you lost. Visa, just want to see, have we broken the highs? Yes, it looks like we have. So in terms of structure, I still see downside on this. It kind of matches MasterCard in a sense, but there's actually a cleaner chart in MasterCard because you had an impulse up, A, B, C, expanding flat, and then another impulse up. Looking at the lines, potentially what we're looking at is the top already, nice little double top. As you can see, some MACD divergence already on the 8-hour, which is really nice, although we could still see a little bit more upside. But as soon as you start to see some downside momentum, you definitely want to start looking for the shorts. I actually prefer this over MasterCard as the structure is much cleaner and it just provides a much cleaner entry potentially if we start to see a turn to the downside. So keep an eye on Visa. Verizon playing out just as we suspected. As you know, we've been following this one for ages now, and it's exactly what we were looking at all the way back from kind of August. We've been calling this the way we wanted it to go, and it's playing out exactly, which is always a good sign to get aggressive with it and look for those entries and trade it all the way up to kind of 66 to 68 if you can find a good clean entry now. You should have technically been in this already around about probably maybe even down here if you were aggressive, but definitely from this 58 region. The only problem with that is you now have a nice big gap that might be closed. You might have to really watch your profits disintegrate before seeing the upside continuation, unless you want to take profits here and then wait for a pullback, in which case you may be giving up a continuation to the upside. So tricky trading, like I said, but I still maintain a Verizon bullish stance. ExxonMobil looks like we've broken to the upside. As you can see, with a little bit of classic charting on this one for a little bit of an inverted head and shoulders for a turn to the upside. And as you can see, really nice MACD divergence, just a really nice little chart trade, technical trade. What we were saying is that there's a good chance we see a little bit of a pullback, which would technically be a retest of the neckline and a closing of this gap. And then you want to look for your upside trade. And ExxonMobil and energy in general is, in my view, going to be one of the best trades of Q4. So definitely something you want to look at entering and getting into in this region, because your upside target is probably going to break the highs at 55 and potentially higher than that, given that we are coming towards what I believe to be the end of a cyclical bear market in energy. Obviously, with the structure that's been playing out, there's still a chance that we go and test the lows once more. But either way, you definitely want to trade this to the upside. And if we do start to turn there, you can take your profits and look for re-entry to the long side, or maybe even a sneaky short up at this region. But getting ahead of ourselves right now, looking for those longs at upside targets 55. American Airlines, as we said, we were following this more closer than Boeing and Delta because the price action was much cleaner, and we started to see that price action play out. We got a nice little boost up to our target entry spot. We've had a nice pullback from that region. So I suspect this is going to continue to play out. We should see a nice dip down towards that $6 region. And that's going to be a great place to find a long entry, because we're going to go from 6 more than likely up towards the 22 region if we can see a dime off of momentum there. And just keep an eye on these lows here, because there's a good chance we'll see a double bottom type structure and then a turn to the upside. So there's some nice trading available to you on American Airlines moving forward. Much cleaner than Delta, that's for sure. Abbott Labs, still waiting for a little bit of a pullback down towards the $100 region. We had a nice strong pullback towards 106. It looks like it's done enough to be called a contracting flat, but I am not happy calling it a contracting flat. I'll be more patient waiting for this to get down to these lows. Otherwise, I'm not going to trade it. I'll have to let it go. Just don't like the structure for it to be called a contracting flat. So suspected to just either pop up back to the highs and then come down, or come down from this region down towards 100, or take off without us, in which case we'll leave it be and let it run, because there was no trade available to us. But if we do see price action down in this $100 region, it's definitely worth a buy because the structure is really clean, really nice, and really worth trading. Adobe, remaining mixed, choppy sideways. I'm actually going to take Adobe off the watch list. Nothing worth looking at. Our sneaky Deutsche Bank trade, starting to run to the upside, looking nice. Came out of this nice long drawn out structure and just has some upside momentum available to it. For those of you that haven't seen this, we're looking for Deutsche Bank to get back up to the $60 region. I don't know what's going to drive it or the fundamentals behind it, but technically speaking, this is a very nice clean trade with really nice upside momentum and upside potential and fairly low risk on the downside. So definitely worth looking at, and the risk reward just makes it a very clean trade. Johnson & Johnson, nice clean structure, nice push off the lows of what we believe to be our C wave. And what we can expect in this region, given the current market conditions, is a little bit of a consolidation up and down, and then look for those long entries. This is another one that looks really clean in terms of a structure and really good upside potential. Look for this to get to like 170, 180 to the upside. So another really clean long trade, but patient with your entry. Ross Stores, as we said, we were looking for this to push up into this 104 region. We've got quite a nice big spike up to 117 and then a pullback down towards 80 to 90. Obviously, with such a high spike, we can expect this to get back down towards 90 now. I'm just going to go into the line chart and make it a little bit cleaner. And as you can see, you're looking at about 87 as a full target, generally speaking. So short trade, yeah, definitely nice big gap that can support the trade for you. The downside is kind of matched and you're trading against a running flat momentum, so it's kind of dangerous. I would be inclined to just be more patient with it and wait for it to get to this 86 region and then trade that to the long side. But other than that, really nice clean trade, nice clean structure. Really like what I'm looking at here for the upside potential once we see things get down here. It might take a little bit of time though. If we look at alternation, we might be here until kind of February, waiting for that long entry. AT&T, another little pop higher, little gap. Still think this is going to continue on the upside, and we should see 32 on this market. Again, probably a little bit of a sideways consolidation on the lower time frames before we see continuation to the upside. And DraftKings, which was a late addition to the watch list, thanks to Hasvane, but it looks really clean structure, really good momentum to the upside, really good upside potential, especially given that with everyone in lockdown and kind of going back into their home life, there's going to be a lot of online action, especially with sports still running. Now that they've figured out the whole sports issue, sports is running, but people are staying home to watch it. So things like DraftKings, fundamentally speaking, are in a really good position. And from a technical point of view, it really doesn't get much cleaner than this. So definitely want to look for those longs with upside target, probably around about the $80 region. Okay, $70, sorry, a little bit of over eager there. $70 upside potential and a $41 entry. So really clean trade. Cool guys, that's it. As you can see, slow markets for the rest of the week, but some really clean, really good potential trades available to us probably early to mid next week. So get ready, get your strategies ready, and yeah, choose your winners and let them run. Cool guys, have a great week. Rest of your week, enjoy your weekend.